Historians of Reddit. What's a devastating event that no one talks about? The Bronze Age collapse. Arguably more devastating than the fall of the West Roman Empire. So much knowledge lost, truly one of history's great mysteries. I recommend reading up on it. It's really interesting. Bronze Age collapse is the biggest one. Treblinka gets overshadowed by Auschwitz a lot. And the actual detailed description of the devastation of the American Indian Wars. The Armenian, Greek, Assyrian genocide. 1915. By the Ottomans. Around 1.5 million people died. Either from the genocide itself or the concentration camps. Anil Tabulari. It's not yet officially recognized. Contemporary Turkey denies it happened. Asked my history studying friend about this. She said there's a lot of events that people don't talk about. For example, there was a lot of countries involved in the Balkan conflict who knew about the massacre of Srebrenica but still allowed it to happen. So many historical events are just so grim and depressing when you read about it. We knew bad things were happening but didn't stop until it was too late for many people. Holodomor. I didn't even learn about this until college, but Stalin intentionally starved 6 million Ukrainians to death. He did plenty of awful stuff, but this one seems to be glossed over despite the scale and genocidal aspects of it. Genghis Khan's empire could feasibly have wiped out Christianity and Islam as we know it. Only stopped because of the death of a ruler. Not because they found an army they couldn't beat. Not a historian, but just look at Poland's history, they've been messed up a lot. The ongoing genocide against indigenous people in North America. The Mayan society and the lost scriptures that we still haven't found on top of the scriptures we still can't seem to decipher. When 3 Roman legions were ambushed and destroyed in Germania in AD 9. For me, it's the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. I know it gets joked about a lot, but my God, think of where we would have been if that knowledge hadn't been lost? That, in combination with the period of time in the Dark Age, when knowledge was generally suppressed, is so tragic. We could be miles ahead of where we are now if not for that. The blinding of 15,000 soldiers. The Bulgarians and Byzantines would clash every couple of years, and after one battle the Byzantine leader just snapped and cut out the eyes of the soldiers that surrendered. Then sent them back home. The Bulgarian leader died upon hearing the news. Dramatic comedy to meet you. I stopped their cause after it makes no sense, repeat itself. I've been told I'm making shit up when I've brought up Japanese atrocities. Some people really cannot fathom that an entire nation can go off crazy. Or that someone's upbringing allows them to do truly evil things and call it patriotism. The number of people I've met who literally deny that the Nanjing massacre happened is insane. Ridiculous. Yeah. People talk about how terrible Nazi Germany is. And they truly do deserve it. But I'm not sure how many Westerners truly understand how psychopathic Imperial Japan was when it came to how it treated its imperial holdings and carried out its war effort. Systemic, borderline industrialized mass rape in Korea, for example. Not that the Western imperial powers were all that better a few decades, centuries prior. Oh yeah. I was going to go the World War II route. Specifically the encirclements on the Eastern Front. Like Smolensk Pocket. We just don't see that type of whole-scale military destruction anymore. And what happened on the Eastern Front, plus nukes, is why I believe we haven't seen a total war to the same degree since. But China, Japan was equally as destructive. And although the powers were not as evenly matched on military technology, the brutality was pretty far up there. The current Chinese government and the mentality stems from basically the century prior to Communist China being established, with all the unfair treaties with Western nations and imperialism. The idea is that the country needs to grow strong in order to not be trampled underfoot or bullied. Again, apparently climate change played a part in things too, with the sea peoples migrating southward to a more bearable climate, being met with hostility, and utterly bitch-slapping several civilizations that stood in their way. Only ones that stood against them were the Egyptians. And even then, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Not to mention a bunch of Mycenaeans getting pissed at their local rulers and staging rebellions and popular uprisings, further destabilizing their entire kingdom. Not sure where you went to school, but it seemed like that's all we talked about for my Euro and Us history classes in HS. Never talked about the Bronze Age thing though. This whole story is just so sad. And the saddest part is that these women were literally fighting for compensation on their deathbeds, and only a few received justice before they died. Talk about manipulating vulnerable people into doing your dirty work. There's a movie coming about it soon with Joey King. Hell, hasn't the Turkish government prosecuted people under the insulting Turkishness law for recognizing the genocide? Well, mass shootings in the U.S. kill 400 people a year and cigarettes killed 1,200 people yesterday. You can't expect people to be rational about these things. Greater than there's a spectacular historical fiction novel about it by Ruta Sepetys called Salt to the Sea. Highly recommend. It's very humanizing. Just put a hold at my local library. Thanks for the rec. My grandparents were survivors of Holodomor. They ate meals made of grass, urtica, tree bark, pancakes from rumiks. Sometimes there was a luck to get some mushrooms in the forest, soup, boiled bones instead of meat, leaves of tilia or cherry instead of tea. Would they though? From my limited understanding of the Mongol Empire, as it was actually pretty tolerant on a religious front as long as the Khan received his due. Lots of people know about the famine. Hardly anyone knows about its genocidal character. By genocide, I presume you mean the entirely peaceful westward expansion of white settlers who totally did not have any assistance from the army we call colonialism. And later, manifest destiny. Correct? Seriously though, the government did some pretty terrible stuff to the natives, a lot of which even the settlers were disturbed by. Everyone talks about that all the time. And it was just 3 legions. Rome suffered a lot of defeats on that scale that are much more rarely talked about. Challenger was talked about all the time as a kid in the 90s. Then 9/11. Then people stopped talking about Challenger until another rocket launched. Netflix has a documentary about medieval Japan. It seems like the solution to every problem was, slaughter all men, women and children. It doesn't help that Japan is currently refusing to acknowledge many of their worst atrocities in WW2. I get it. The US needed Japan as a bulwark against the Soviets and allowed some cultural institutions to stay. For a few reasons. But not taking responsibility for the past is clearly wrong. Not just the rape of Nanking. There's people who literally worked in Japanese biological weapons facilities that are responsible for direct torture and murder of subjects referred to colloquially as Maruta logs that still to this day deny any wrongdoing. Scores of people were abducted, tortured and eventually killed to fuel Imperial Japan's warfare endeavors. And yet so many war criminals were allowed to basically just walk away at the end of it all just because of the growing fear of communism. Wait, people deny it? Is it just that they do not know? There's plenty of proof. Yep. These are some of the more common theories. But the fact is that we know very little from this time since there was a significant drop in literacy. No. That was sometime in the early Dark Ages. Some believe it was destroyed by the Arabs. Some say it was destroyed before that. Many consider the lost knowledge from the library's destruction to be the reason we call the subsequent period the Dark Ages. And 50 times as many people will have committed suicide with firearms as caught in shootings. Sure. The religions would have survived. But it's doubtful either would be as dominant in the world if they were fully conquered. I meant influence wiped out, not the religion itself. Right. It was totally enabled by the English Parliament and Queen Victoria. The best part is that Turkey sent several thousands of dollars worth of aid to Ireland, which could have saved thousands of lives. And Parliament had it sent right back. Jerks. When a statue in tribute to Korean comfort girls was erected across the street from the Japanese embassy in Korea, Japan asked it be removed as it offended them. They're just partisan morons. It's like people who deny the Holocaust. Different issue. Similar mentality. There's worlds upon worlds of evidence of horrific crimes against humanity. And they just choose not to see it. Around 20k commit suicide by firearm. Which is fantastic. If I had to choose to die in a country without legal euthanasia, it's definitely the best option. Even in countries where euthanasia is legal, it's still the best option. Mass shooting deaths kill around as many people in a year as cheeseburgers do in a few hours. Real numbers of homicides are committed by and large by minorities. Netflix just released a whole series on it. Dave Chappelle also discussed it in his special. Most of the Japanese denial is a little different. It's more like, we don't talk about that. It's not our fault, rather than, that didn't happen. And lots of feigned ignorance along the lines of, oh, I don't know anything about that. It's not certain. There are several theories. And the truth is that many academics are afraid if saying that Muslims destroyed it for obvious reasons. Oh. The Soviets would have definitely taken a chunk out of Japan in 1945 had they not surrendered. They had already crossed into Manchuria and were moving armies from Germany east. That's the factor that changed summer 45. Not the destruction of yet another city by the US Air Forces.